Hello and welcome. This is ITxB, today with how to design an Android full stack app. Alright, great. So let's look into how we can design a full stack Android app, what goes into that, and the first steps of accomplishing it. So today's video is basically just here to give you an overview of the kind of technology that goes into it, how this technology works with one another, and most importantly, how you can get started with it. And in future videos, I'm planning to give you an in-depth view into all of those different technologies. You will see there's quite a lot of them. So I'm guessing we're kind of starting off with a series here. Today we're going to look into how to use Android Studio, which is the environment that you will mostly use to develop the UI, so that's the app that's actually on your phone. And then we're going to look into how you can create the endpoints, so that's how you can communicate with your server side in order to retrieve data. Also, your server side is where most of the logic is going on. But it's going to be a very simple app for now, just so we have an idea of where you can go, what you can do with it. Alright, so let's have a first look at the stack that I'm using here. And you can see pretty well that for this I'm using Python, which I'm actually using in conjunction with Flask. You can see up here I'm importing from Flask the blueprints, which we're getting into what that means a little later. The request, which is basically there to enable me to create all of my endpoints, and JSONify, because, you know, in the internet it has become pretty much a standard to have all of your data files in the JSON format in order to basically agnostic of what kind of system it is that's requesting from your endpoint. You will always get this JSON format, which is basically JavaScript object notation. That's what that's short for. And we're using it here in order to send data back to our Android app. You can see why I'm using Flask here, because it's incredibly easy to get some endpoints up and running, right? You can see there's a decorator that basically allows me to create a route in one line. And there's another decorator that allows me to protect this line with a JWT. So that's a web token that enables you to see if the user is authorized or not. And I have another module here, my login blueprint module, that, you know, you can see how the user would log in the end. You can deny permission, you can grant permission. One very important thing when you're registering your users and you're committing their password to the database is that you hash their password. This is what's happening down here, basically. So what hashing means is that the password is later unrecognizable. So there's a mathematical algorithm that runs over whatever this password may be. Let's say the password is my birthday 123, something like this. Probably shouldn't be. But this algorithm runs over it and basically changes it to just a sequence of numbers and letters that you will then commit to the database with the user's information. And then later when you retrieve it, you run the same algorithm in reverse. You have a secret that you tell this algorithm, and then you can compare the two passwords. And if they match, then the user is authorized, but if your database ever gets compromised, then at least you won't leak all of the passwords to whoever has hacked your database. So that's a little bit of an important piece for, you know, the end user and how you want to protect their credentials. So last but not least, the database. We've already talked about it a little bit. The database I'm using here is a very simple SQlite database. You can see this with tools that are freely available, but you can also interact with it through what I'm doing here is SQalchemy, which basically allows me to not have to choose a particular database, but I can just issue the same commands to any SQL-based, so relational database with this. And the second reason that I'm using Flask, apart from the fact that it's so incredibly easy to implement, is that it's based on Python, right? So whatever kind of logic I want to have here in the background can just be in Python code, and it's immediately implemented. You can see that I've modularized my code here a lot. And if I wanted to add any kind of modules to this, again, then this would just run as any other sort of Python code. So in this case here, this is a very simple database actually that allows you to save some planets and their characteristics to a database, and then later retrieve it, right? So I would put this on a Linux-based server, most likely. What I'm doing is I have a Linux-based machine, which is in a DMZ in my home network, which are basically two firewalls. One firewall goes out to the WAN, then there's the firewall, then there is your Linux server, then there's another firewall, and behind that then is your LAN, so where you would have all of your smartphones, smart TVs, smart home gadgets, and so forth, so that even if your server gets penetrated, your LAN is not. And on this, you would just spin up a very simple WSGI server, and on this have Flask running for the endpoints in order to be able to serve the data. So once that's done, you can access this data basically with anything. It can be an iPhone app, it can be an Android app, it can be a web application, it doesn't matter, because we have everything in this JSON format. Basically, every application can read this. And they're key value pairs, right? So we would send planet name equals Mercury, just like you can see here. We would send this to the user, and whatever kind of end application they use, they can see, all right, I've just received a data string where the name of the planet is Mercury, right? And we will use this in our Android application. You can see this here on the other end, which is the actual Android app. And this is a very simple app that I've created. It's basically just a shopping list app. And you can see, I'll just really quickly open the layout here. Let's see. You can see it's a very simple application where you have the option to log in, to register with the application. And then in the main activity, you can see there's a list of shopping items that you want. It's cloud-based, and users can basically share their lists with each other. You can see that there is one file which is called endpoints. And this already lets you know that this is communicating with an endpoint. And you can see that those endpoints, basically in whatever language they might be written, we've just seen one in Flask, they just need to send requests to that endpoint and will receive some data back. So that would be the first step in creating your app. Now, how all of this works and what you see right now here is Android Studio. I'm sure there's a bunch of tutorials out there that will show you how it does work. You've seen that on the endpoints we had Python as the language of choice. For Android, there's actually two fairly similar languages that both work. You can see this here. This is Java, but you can also, in a more recent version of Android Studio, use Kotlin, which gets rid of a lot of the boilerplate code and presumably is easier than Java. I don't really know. I'm kind of a purist. I still code all of my Android apps in Java, as you can see here. But the principle is the same, right? So you're talking to those endpoints that we've just set up. And basically what you do is you ask for the data, you get the data back, and then you put it in a format that people can actually see and interpret. How that works, we're going to look at this in a second on the phone. Alright, so here we are at the phone. This is basically the same login screen that you just saw in Android Studio, and basically what we've done here is we've entered our email and our password. And we want to log in here. And there we see there's already a couple of items on the list. And if you go up here, you can add another item. And let's just add some raspberries. I kind of misspelled that, sorry. And I don't know, some chocolate. There we go. I'll post this, and you can see they're immediately there. Now, this is more or less how the app works and how it communicates with the backend. As you've seen, the backend again was in Flask, and it's a very simple thing to do and implement. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this overview of an Android app, the kind of technologies that go into making one, and how they interact, how you can use them, how you can get started yourself. As I said in the beginning of the video, I'm looking forward to making more in-depth videos on each one of these components, and I'm hoping to see you there again in the coming days. Till then, have a good one.